Hello, this is Haley Fannin, Reference and Instruction Librarian at UPike Libraries. Today, I'm going to introduce the basics of copyright, what it protects, and how it pertains to visual art. Lastly, I will show you how to find images that you can use for your mosaic projects that are free from copyright restrictions. Most of us are familiar with the copyright symbol here, but what does it mean? Well, copyright protects what we call intellectual property. Intellectual property is something that has been created by the human mind. We know it's wrong to use or steal someone's physical property, but it's also wrong to use or steal someone's intellectual property. Also, there's a difference between intellectual property and industrial property. Industrial property includes products like clothing and food, and is set apart by restricted or trademark symbols. Intellectual property is creative works like art, film, computer programs like video games and cell phone apps, dramatic works like plays, written works like books, and music. These are all protected by copyright and cannot be used or performed by someone who did not create them unless they are given permission by the original creator or unless it falls under fair use. Fair use is when you use a copyrighted work in certain circumstances. These circumstances include criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Most of the ways you will use copyrighted works while in college fall under fair use because you are using them for educational purposes. There are 4 factors to consider when looking at fair use: purpose, nature, amount, and effect. Purpose deals with why. Why are you using the copyrighted work? Is it for commercial use or for educational purposes? Because educational purposes fall under fair use, but commercial would not. We also need to take into account the nature of the copyrighted work. Does it lend itself to teaching purposes? Because some creative works don't. Also, how much of the copyrighted work are you using? Because a portion, like a chapter of a book or a scene from a play, is more likely to fall under fair use than using the entire work. Lastly, copyright revolves mainly around money and profit. Is how you are using the copyrighted work going to affect how much money the original creator makes from it? If the answer is yes, most likely that will not fall under fair use. There are also derivative works. This is when you use a copyrighted work in a new or unexpected way that is considered transformative, and these derivative works fall within fair use. Examples of derivative works include parodies, translations, musical arrangements, abridgments, and condensations. However, what is considered to be transformative is often a subjective gray area that is hard to prove, and we'll take a look at some examples of this later. Lastly, there is the public domain. Works that are in the public domain are no longer protected by copyright. That means that these works can be copied, distributed, adapted, and performed without breaking any copyright laws. Works fall into the public domain when their copyright protections expire. These expiration dates are different depending on the format or medium of the work and the country of origin. In most countries, written works like books fall into the public domain 70 years after the author dies. And for visual art in the US, it is 100 years after the death of the creator. However, these determinations and expiration dates are changing all the time. Now, let's take a look at some examples of copyright court cases in the art world. First is the Associated Press versus SHEPARD FAIREY. The image on the left is a photograph of former President Barack Obama. The photographer sold his rights to the photograph to the Associated Press, which is a pretty common practice for freelance photographers and journalists. The image on the right is the famous Hope poster created by artist SHEPARD FAIREY. Now, upon first viewing, these images appear different enough that there is no copyright infringement, But let's take a look at the issues surrounding the case. FAIREY's Hope poster made a substantial amount of money during Obama's first campaign. Also, he claimed to have used a different photograph when creating his work, but he later recanted this in court. And it was discovered by facial recognition software to be the same photo. The Associated Press and Mr. FAIREY ultimately settled this dispute out of court, but the question remains, if FAIREY's image wasn't so profitable, and if he hadn't lied about using this photograph for inspiration in the first place, would there even have been a case at all? What do you think? Is FAIREY's art different enough to be considered transformative? Next is the case of Art Rogers versus Jeff Koons. The image on the top is a photograph by Art Rogers called Puppies. It was used in postcards and greeting cards. The image on the bottom is of a sculpture by Jeff Koons called String of Puppies. The similarities between the two works are obvious, but the mediums have changed. One is a photograph and the other is a sculpture. Again, what do you think? Is Koons' work transformative? He's added blue puppies and flowers to the people's ears and hair. Let's take a look at the issues of this case. Koons removed the copyright notice from Rogers' postcard before outsourcing the cast of the sculpture. And in court, Koons claimed his work fell under fair use by parody. Ultimately, the judge denied Koons' claim of fair use and ordered him to turn over all infringing materials, which totaled in a $750,000 loss for Koons. Last, we'll take a look at the case of Patrick CARIOU versus Richard Prince. On the left is a photograph by Patrick CARIOU from a series of photographs he did of Caribbean people called Rasta. And on the right is Richard Prince's transformed work. The differences are small, right? But do you think that Prince's alterations have changed the original meaning of the work? Well, in court, CARIOU wins at the district level. Prince appeals this decision and wins that appeal. His work is considered transformative. The Supreme Court refuses the case, which means Prince's win is the decision that stands and will serve as precedent for future copyright infringement cases. Here are some takeaways when it comes to copyright. What is considered transformative is interpretive and often hard to prove. What one person would consider transformative, another person would not. Also, copyright law is fluid and changing. Be careful and provide attribution when using other people's materials, particularly while you are in school. Also, here are the sources that I used during this. Next, I'm going to show you how to find images that you can use for your mosaic project that fall within the public domain or within the Creative Commons. So starting with a regular Google Images search, just going to Google and typing Google Images, you can look, it'll be in a different place depending on what browser you're using, but you can go to Settings and then Advanced Search, which will bring up a screen like this. So I can put in the name of the person that I'm looking to find. Here I have Alexander Hamilton. Then I want to look at my usage rights section here. The drop-down box, I want to look at the Creative Commons licenses. I can go ahead and hit search, and this will bring up images that either fall into the public domain or the Creative Commons. So looking at this portrait here, it says it comes from the Wikimedia Commons. I can go ahead and click that, and it will give me more information or data about this image, who the artist is, and the permissions I have here. This file is made available under the Creative Commons, most likely within the public domain, because as we can see, our artist died over 100 years ago. And thanks for watching.